Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. My name is Charlie Fry. Let's get started. Alright, as you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, again, I really should just stop saying that. We're doing a 7-round draft of the Cleveland Browns today using the Draft Network's mock draft machine, which I think is one of the better ones out there available for free. And the idea here is to sort of go over the Cleveland Browns as a whole, their draft needs, what's going on in the news today. And this draft is sort of what I would do is if I was the Browns GM, and with some of the thinking and thought process along the way that I'll share with you. So what I did was I went on the mock draft network draft simulator, selected the Browns, and set it up to do all 7 rounds. So every other team was picked by the computer, and I did all the picking for the Browns. That is why I have what I have. And remember, if it's not a player you don't like, maybe they weren't available, and I'll try to explain that as I go along. All right, so first let's take a look at the Brown team needs. According to draftnetwork.com, we have offensive tackle, which I think is the worst kept secret in the league right now in terms of draft needs. Greg Robinson is out. They absolutely need somebody to be in that left tackle position to protect Baker Mayfield going forward. And in Kevin Stefanski's offense, he's going to need somebody at least along the lines of a Riley Reiff, who was serviceable in Minnesota last year. Moving on, you have a safety. Defensive backfield needs a little bit of help. Greedy Williams didn't exactly play that well last year, but it was his rookie season. I'm willing to give him a pass. Denzel Ward coming back from some injury problems. The secondary does need to be addressed, especially considering, and that lines up with the next bullet point, linebackers. I think this team might be playing a lot of nickel and dime defenses next year, simply because they let Joe Schobert walk in free agency, and Mac Wilson and Taki are really the only good linebackers left on the roster. So I think this ties in with this, and they could be sort of, if they do one, they might not do the other. They might do both, but at this point, given what I've seen over the last few weeks / months, I kind of doubt it. I think it's going to be one or the other. And then you could probably definitely use interior offensive line. Edge rusher is a need, and wide receiver I threw in at the bottom. I don't remember if that was listed on the Draft Network's needs tab, but in my opinion, I think one more couldn't hurt. And then of course I've left some notes at the top. They don't have a 5th round pick this year, so they might trade down to try to get a few more. As you can tell by the board, there's only 7 picks, so they don't have a lot of draft capital this year, and that's okay. The other newsworthy notes is that they're still probably in talks with the Vikings trying to get Anthony Harris in a trade. That might end up being a draft day trade, you know, probably first or second day, if you will. As a Vikings fan, I can tell you that so far that I've heard that the contract talks between the Anthony Harris camp and the Minnesota Vikings so far isn't going great. So it looks like we might be trading him after all. And then the other piece of news to keep out for is that according to reports, and I think it was CBS that first said it, that they're in the Jadeveon Clowney hunt, and that they have made the best offer to him so far that we know. So if any of those dominoes fall, it could heavily affect this draft if they fall before draft day. But so far that hasn't happened. It remains to be seen. Just a couple things to keep in mind as we go forward. And I think now is the time to start making picks. So they have the 10th pick in the first round, top 10, and I'm going to do what I've been doing for the last couple mock drafts that I've done, and during this draft he was available, so I went with Andrew Thomas, the offensive tackle from Georgia. And since I've got a little bit more room here, I decided to throw in their position in college. Not that, you know, you guys probably don't need to know these things, but I just like it for the visual, if you will. So I think, you know, other scenarios that could play out. All 4 of the top tackles, Tristan Wirfs, Jedrick Wills, Mekhi Becton, and Andrew Thomas, are off the board by the time the Browns pick. In that situation, if Isaiah Simmons is still there, I think they'll go Isaiah Simmons because they do need a linebacker, and he's the best one in the class, plus he can do a lot of other things. If Isaiah Simmons and all 4 offensive tackles are gone, the Browns have met their nightmare scenario, and they will trade down. And I know fans hate that, but that will be the result. I think at least one of those 5 players will be there at number 10. Maybe even more of them. In this scenario, I actually had the choice between Andrew Thomas and Jedrick Wills, so that was nice. But I went with Andrew Thomas. I think he's the more polished, pro-ready offensive tackle that the Browns can take. Moving on to the 2nd round, I had the 41st pick. I decided to go safety. I went with Antoine Winfield Jr. from Minnesota. And Antoine Winfield, I think, is a guy that's been moving up boards pretty recently. There are definitely other options to be had at this point as far as safety concerns go. I had the opportunity, I could have taken Ashton Davis from Cal. That would have been a decent pick, but I think Antoine Winfield at this spot would be pretty good. So if the Browns want to trade back maybe a few in this spot just to get a 5th round pick or maybe another 4th, that wouldn't be a bad idea because there's plenty of safeties in this spot available. As I said, Ashton Davis was available, Jeremy Chin is available at this spot. So you don't have to get the best one off the board. But Antoine Winfield's probably safety number 4 for a lot of people in their top 10s or positional rankings, if you will. Moving on to the 3rd round with the 74th overall pick, I went with Malik Harrison, linebacker from Ohio State. And I think that by the time this pick comes up, if you have not taken a linebacker, there is no point after this. The position is really weak to begin with, and it will dry up very fast. You have your top position players, you know, Patrick Queen, Kenneth Murray, the aforementioned Isaiah Simmons. Then after that, you're already dealing with table scraps. You could get Harrison, you could get Willie Gay Jr., you could get Troy Dye, but there's not much to be had after this. So I think after the 3rd round, at least from what I saw in this simulation, you better get one at this spot or not get one at all. So I decided to get one at this spot. All right, moving on to the 2nd pick of the 3rd round for the Browns, number 97 overall. I decided to take a luxury pick, if you will. Offensive tackle is a need, so, you know, thinking about Kevin Stefanski's offense and what he's going to be doing this year in Cleveland, I went with a project offensive tackle, which is, you know, at the end of the 3rd, maybe a little reach, but I can't pass this guy up. Ben Barch, the tackle from St. John's, who had an amazing Senior Bowl. You know, one of the concerns about him was that he wasn't facing really good talent, but everybody that they threw at him for that Senior Bowl week, he was able to handle just fine. And I think given his intangibles, if he can be coached up, and he could definitely be your right tackle opposite of Andrew Thomas for years to come in this offense. So that is a luxury pick that I decided to make in that spot, and I feel pretty good about it. Moving on to the 4th round, pick 115, I decided to go something that's not on the board for team needs, and I went with Hunter Bryant, the tight end from Washington. Washington wasn't going to fit on this tag, and I decided to just abbreviate it, so that's why that is. Hunter Bryant is an interesting tight end prospect. You know, there's a lot of arguments to be made about who is the best tight end in this class. The one from Missouri, whose name I'm not going to butcher right now, tested the best, so he could be the first one off the board. Bryson Hopkins didn't do very well. Hunter Bryant I like because he's not so much a blocking tight end, but he is probably a better receiving tight end already than David Njoku. And in a Kevin Stefanski offense, we're going to be running a lot of 2 tight ends since you need tight ends. And that's no surprise that we took a tight end last year. The Vikings did in the 2nd round, Irv Smith Jr. out of Alabama, and he did pretty well in the Stefanski offense. So there is precedent for this to be done. And I think Hunter Bryant is one of the more interesting prospects, given that he is probably a better receiver than he is blocker, and he's a better split out wide than he is in line. So this could be somebody that is put into a lot of motion and could surprise some people during the season if they decided to go this route. And I think he would do well in Kevin Stefanski's offense. And you're going to hear me reference that a lot because, duh, Vikings fan. And I've seen a lot of that offense last year with Dalvin Cook and Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr. So I'm hoping to apply some of that learned knowledge to the situation. All right, moving on to round 6, pick 187 overall. Whether or not they get Jadeveon Clowney may not affect this pick, but I decided to get them some edge rushing depth. I went with Jonathan Garvin from Miami. Just basically trying to get best player available at a position of need at this point, this late in the draft. The good players really get soaked up. If you're looking for a late round quarterback, I think this is the draft to have it. I think there was like quite a few available at this spot. You know, James Morgan, Tyler Huntley, a couple of the other guys. So I decided to go with that. If they get Jadeveon Clowney, maybe you erase this, maybe you don't. But I think it's a good value pick for the position that they're in. All right, last pick of the day for the Cleveland Browns, round 7, pick 200 and, what is that, 44? I decided to go with wide receiver Kendrick Rogers from Texas A&M. Just because, you know, wide receiver depth doesn't hurt, and you never know. You might get something nice out of a late round wide receiver. You know, nothing really to write home about Kendrick Rogers. He was utilized quite you know, quite a bit in Texas A&M. But there's a question, you know, if you're getting drafted at this position in the draft, are you going to be able to make that leap to the next level? And I think in the Brown situation, you know, they're not going to be running a lot of 3-4 wide receiver sets unless they find themselves falling behind a lot in games. And with that defense, they shouldn't be. But I think having a guy like Kendrick Rogers just to fill in the void, maybe even end up on the practice squad, would be a good idea. Just another body, some depth, and, you know, throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. All right, so how did I do? I think I did pretty well. We got the tackle, we got the safety, and we got the linebacker actually all in order according to those needs in our first 3 picks, so I feel pretty good about that. Barch was obviously a luxury pick, so was Hunter Bryant. Garvin is a depth pick, Rogers is a depth pick, probably practice squad material. So if this were the draft that were to come out for the Browns in reality, I think a lot of it is going to be tied to these first 5 picks, and whether or not they succeed will depend on really opportunity and coaching. And I think you could say that really about anybody, so that's not exactly great analysis. There I am again critiquing my own video in my video. I seem to do that a lot. All right, but anyway, that's the video for today. 7-round draft for the Cleveland Browns. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this, and if you want me to do one for your team. I've got a lot of time to kill here in quarantine. Might as well do it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.